Hello everybody, this is another Hot Wheels collector video. Today we are looking at the Land Rover Series II. This is a brand new casting for 2023 and first debuts in the 2023 Q case. This casting has not had any other colours come out of it prior to this release, so this is the first edition colour of this thing. And I genuinely can't think of any better colour that this casting could have been kicked off with. If you don't already know, a lot of the Land Rover Series IIs, which were actually produced in real life, did come out of the factory with this colour on it. It's kind of like an army-esque green, done with a matte finish. Definitely gives this car a way more heavy-duty look, in my opinion. So I will quickly mention where I actually found this car then. So I found this car in a local Aldi store at the price of £1.69. That's quite a fair price here in the UK, and kind of is the average price. A lot of stores sell them at that price, including Smith's Toy Superstore and B&M. So if you don't know what an Aldi store is and don't know what they sell, essentially they are kind of like a bargain shop. That's the only way I can really describe them. And they sell quite random things. So they always sell meats and stuff all year round, but then they get these things called special buys in, which essentially is an item that once it's gone, it's gone. They do get Hot Wheels in every 6 months or so. It really does depend. Sometimes they get them like every month, and sometimes they just don't get them for years. But I was pleased to see in groups that people were saying Aldi's getting Q case. There was quite a fuss about it, and I was thinking, really? My Aldi hasn't, because I just went today. And they said there's a memo. So there's going to be a message sent out to all the stores, and they're meant to put them out on Monday morning. So I went back to the same Aldi on Monday, and guess what? 5 whole boxes of Q case were sitting there completely untouched. I was so happy. I did go through them all. There were no super treasure hunts. However, there were tons of these new castings, and there's definitely enough for everyone, provided the scalpers don't take them all. But yeah, I'm telling you, there was at least 10 of these Land Rovers, but I only picked one up because that's all I need. I also picked up everything else I wanted out of that case, so I was super happy, and there's genuinely nothing else that I want from that case that I didn't already pick up. But anyways, let me give you some facts about the real life car. So in real life, the Land Rover Series II was the successor to the Series I, and the Series II was produced from 1958 to 1961, and then there was the Series IIA, which came after that one. The main difference between the Series II and the Series IIA was the performance. The Series IIA did have better performance than the older Series II. The Series II also had 3 engine options. We had a 2-litre petrol inline 4, a 2.25-litre petrol inline 4, and a 2-litre inline 4 diesel engine. This car also had a 4-speed manual transmission, and the highest horsepower engine did have 81 horsepower and 124 pound-feet of torque, converting to 169 newton meters of torque. This car also had a top speed of around 60 to 65 miles per hour. That converts to 96 kilometers per hour to 105 kilometers per hour. This car was also all-wheel drive, and in fact, it was the first civilian all-wheel drive car. That's quite a cool little fact there. And now this car has a starting value here in the UK at least of about £5,000. That converts to $6,100 for a quite poor quality example, but if you want a showroom piece example, you'll have to pay about £39,000 here in the UK, and that converts to about $47,300 for you guys watching in the US. You can obviously convert that money to your own currency if you are not from either of these two countries using Google. I will also mention that this car does feature in the 2023 Baja Blazers mini-series, and is car number 10 out of 10 in that set. I will also mention that this car is number 242 out of 250 for 2023. I would also like to mention that this car is classified as a track star. Now you can tell because it does have this loop-de-loop logo engraved into the base, and on some of the card art it also does read track stars. However, mine does not have that logo on it. Essentially what track stars means is it's just a group of castings which perform exceptionally well on the iconic orange Hot Wheels tracks. But anyways, that is it for the facts about this thing. Now let's move on to my actual showcase of the Hot Wheels model. Alright, so kicking off this showcase then, we'll first of all take a look at the side of this car, and I'll first of all mention the wheel choice on this thing. So this car is rolling on the 5-spoke Baja off-road wheels, which first debuted in 2018. And on this car they have been painted in black. Next up, for the body of this car then, it is all painted in this dark green colour with a matte finish to it. Alright, so now onto the actual tamper work on the side of this thing then. First of all, we do have the Cool and Vintage logo featuring here done in black and white. Now if you don't know what Cool and Vintage do, essentially they just restore classic cars. And I did say white. The white featuring on this car is quite a washed out white. It's kind of a whitish grey. It's got a greyish tinge to it. That's all I can really describe it as. It's not a really bright white like paper is, for example. Next up, we do have this large stripe which features across the entirety of the side of this car. It first comes from the rear light section of the car, and then it kind of loops back on itself and goes to the rear fender area of the car. Now this stripe is in the same white which I've previously mentioned. It's quite a washed out white. Next up, we do have the BF Goodrich logo being tampered on here in black. If you don't know what BF Goodrich are, essentially they are just an American tyre company, and they are known to produce pretty good quality tyres. Finally, we do have the Hot Wheels logo featuring on the side of this car being done in white. Next up, onto the actual metal casting of this car then. So first of all, this car does actually have two side X exhausts. You can only see one of the side X exhausts from this side of the car, and you'll be able to see the other side X exhaust of this thing from the next side of the car once we do get around to it. I will mention that this side X exhaust is created through the metal base of this car. Yes, this car does have a metal base, even though it's only a mainline. It's not very often that we see modern mainline castings with a metal base. Usually they have a plastic base as a measure of cost cutting. But on this one, it does have a metal base, even though it doesn't really make the car much heavier. So yes, this car does have a metal base and also does have a metal body. Onto the rest of the metal casting then. So first of all, we do have the door hinge featuring in the metal casting. We also do have the door handle featuring in the metal casting of this thing. And we also do have the fuel filler cap also being moulded into the metal casting. Next up, we do have these little dots in the metal casting as well. Now, after researching for quite a while, I found out that these are actually little pin type things which hold the convertible roof of this car up. Obviously on this Hot Wheels model it doesn't have the convertible roof up, but in real life this car did have a convertible option, and if you did buy the convertible option of this car, you would have a roof which you can put up and down, and hence it does need those pins to hold it in place. I will also mention that unfortunately this casting does not have any wing mirrors, even though they do feature on the car dart, as you can see there. That is unfortunate that that detail is not in the metal casting of this thing. Yeah, that's a bit of a shame. But I will sort of let them off, since these are those skinny chrome wing mirrors which I always talk about, which would be really hard for the Hot Wheels team to execute. And honestly, it's probably better that they just didn't put wing mirrors on this car and instead just left it without them. Otherwise, they would have looked too modern and would have just looked like blobs of metal. So I am going to let them off on that one. Just for this car though, and other cars in a similar boat. I've already done that in the past with other cars as well, when they are in this same situation. But anyways, that is it for the side of this thing. Now let's move on to the front of this car. Alright, so taking a look at the front of this car then, unfortunately it does not receive any tamper work, but that's something to be expected with mainline cars. However, we do have quite a decent amount of detail here in terms of the metal casting and also plastic usage. So first of all, we do have the turn signal or indicator lights of this car featuring moulded into the metal casting. You could easily add your own details here though using Sharpie or acrylic paint. Next up, we do have the license plate holder of this car also featuring moulded into the metal casting. Again, you could add your own details here, but this time I would recommend that you use something like a permanent sticker. Next up, we do have the headlights of this car featuring in the metal casting in a circular shape. You could easily add your own details here, once again using Sharpie or acrylic paint. Next up, we do have a small section of the front grille of this car created actually in the metal casting, and that is the section where on the real life car, it would have a Land Rover badge. You could add your own Land Rover badge here using Sharpie or acrylic paint. Next up, I will mention that the front grille of this car is created through the grey interior plastic. Interestingly though, this car does actually have two different interior plastics. We have a black interior plastic and also grey interior plastic, creating various different parts of this car. Finally, I will mention that the front bumper of this car is created through the grey interior plastic. Anyways, that is it for the front of this thing. Now let's move on to the next side of this car. Alright, so taking a look at the next side of this car then, it is pretty much the exact same as the previous side, so I'm not going to bore you with going over everything all over again. But there are a couple of things which I do want to mention. First of all, I will mention that the second side X exhaust of this car does feature on this side of the thing and is created through the metal base of this car. I will also mention that this side does not have the fuel filler cap, unlike the other side. Anyways, that is it for this side of the car. Now let's move on to the rear of this thing. Alright, so taking a look at the rear of this car then, even though the rear of this car does not receive any tamper work, it still has a lot of detail in terms of the metal casting, and also in terms of plastic usage. So first of all, I will mention that we do have the turn signal or indicator lights of this car being moulded very nicely into the metal casting itself. We also do have the brake lights of this car also featuring in the metal casting, moulded nicely as well. Both of those have been done in a circular shape. That is accurate to the real life car, and even though these do not receive any tamper work detail, you could easily detail them yourself using something like Sharpie or acrylic paints. Next up, we do have the license plate holder of this car featuring in the metal casting. Once again, it does not receive any detail in terms of a license plate, which would be created through tamper work, but you can easily add your own detail here too using something like a permanent sticker. A quick Google will easily get you on the right tracks to finding one that you like. We also do have the portion of the car where the Land Rover badge would sit on the rear of this thing, also featuring in the metal casting in the form of a rectangle, which protrudes from the rest of the body of the car. Nice detailing there. We also do have the tailgate trunk of this car, also featuring in the metal casting, very nicely moulded on there. You can see the outline of it is done fantastically. We also do have the two trunk hinges of this car also featuring in the metal casting there. And finally, hopefully you can see them, there are three small bulges just below the tailgate of this car. Now what those actually are is they are brackets which hold the bumper to the rest of the body of the car on the real life Land Rover Series II. That is it for the metal casting, and the final detail which I haven't already mentioned is in terms of plastic usage. So you can see the entire rear bumper section of this car is created through the grey interior plastic. Anyways, that is it for the rear of this thing. Now let's move on to the top of this car. Alright, so taking a look at the top of this car then, the detail does not stop yet. First of all, we do have this surfboard which features on the interior of this car and is created through the black interior plastic. So first of all, you can see the entire surfboard has been tampered in red. And then it does receive two white stripes. That is the same white which features on the side of this car, and it is quite a washed out white. And then the entire surfboard does receive a white outline to it. We also do have the Land Rover writing also tampered onto this surfboard. And we do have a few straps holding this surfboard down, which are created through the black interior plastic. Alright, so bringing this camera up a little bit, there are a few things I do want to talk about. So first of all, you can see this large seat featuring in the rear of this car, created through the black interior plastic. You can also see this wrench featuring on that seat, once again created through the black interior plastic. Maybe this wrench is a kind of little secret thing hinting towards Land Rovers always breaking down, but I'm not entirely sure. Next up, we do have a pair of sandals featuring in the grey interior plastic of this car. They're actually quite detailed. I will also mention that the entirety of the floor of the interior of this car, being created in grey plastic, does actually receive a texture, which the real life Land Rover Series II does have. Very accurate to the real life car. I love that detail there. And this same texturing does actually continue onto the hood of this car. Finally, I will mention that there is this weird box featuring in the trunk of this car. It is created through the black interior plastic. Moving along a little bit more then, I will mention that the entirety of the dash of this car is created through the black interior plastic. I will also mention that the front seats of this car, in which there are three of them, are all created through the grey interior plastic. I will also mention that the folded down windshield of this car is created through the black interior plastic as well. And that folded down windshield does actually receive some detail in terms of tamper work. So first of all, we do have the Cologne logo being tampered in white and red. That white featuring on that Cologne logo is that same washed out looking white. Next up, we do have the Campbell logo. I'm pretty sure that is Fraser Campbell's logo, and that is tampered once again in white and red. And the white used is that washed out white which we've seen across the car previously. We also do have this interesting circular shaped sticker on this thing, which reads TE99. That TE99 is tampered in black, and the rest of the sticker is tampered in a mixture of purple and white. Now, after some further research, I have found out that this little sticker is actually a tax disc. Now, what I mean by that is, in the olden days, here in the UK, you used to have to display this little sticker, which was proof that your car was taxed. Next up, onto the hood of this car, then we do have some more detail to go over. So first of all, we do have the two hood latches of this car, featuring the metal casting. And finally, I'll mention that there is this spare wheel featuring on the hood of this car, and it is created through the black interior plastic. This spare wheel also does receive some tampo to give it a nice chrome looking lip. The tampo which does feature on this wheel is done in silver. The reason why it's done in silver is because they don't have a chrome tampo paint. But anyways, that is it for the top of this thing. And that is also it for my showcase of this car. So now let's move on to my final thoughts and review on this thing. Alright, so now it's time for my final thoughts and review on this car. I really do like this metal casting. I think it's got a lot of detail. And I genuinely don't think there is any detail missing on this thing. It is a very awesome one at that, and I can't wait to see where it pops up next. We do already know that it will pop up in the 2024 mainline as a red edition, I believe, but I do wonder where it will come next. I do think that this car will feature in the premium line in the near future, And I do think it'll probably come in car culture in some kind of off-road set, and it will receive the proper premium tempo treatment which this casting does deserve, as it is missing a few details like things like the headlights and all the rear details, so there is quite a lot of detail missing, but for a mainline it does fantastically at executing the details which are needed on this thing. Yes, it would have been nice to have seen rear tempo and front tempo, but that's just something that you don't get on mainlines. You only get 2 tempo print presses, and in this case it was the sides and the top of this car. But for what you're paying, I think you get a lot of value in this car. I also really do like the wheel choice on this thing. I genuinely don't think there would have been any better wheel choice for this car. I don't think the beadlock wheels would have looked as good as these wheels do on this thing. It's fantastic. And it was also a very, very pleasant surprise to see a metal base featuring on this car. Whilst this car is still not very heavy duty feeling, premium feeling or heavy feeling, it's just nice to have a metal base. You get a bit more value for money once again there. And also, I'm a big fan of the plastic usage on this thing. I really do like the spare wheel, and I also like the fact that that did receive tempo work. And the interior of this car also has a very interesting design, with cool little hidden things such as sandals, the little wrench on the seats, and that large surfboard featuring in the rear is a very interesting design. Lots of people do transport larger objects in the back of these things. An example of that is a motorbike. And the reason why they do it is because once the roof of this car is off, you can transport really tall things which wouldn't fit in regular everyday cars, which we do see on our roads today, which have been manufactured in the recent age. So it's nice to see that they have put a surfboard in the back of this thing, which is a large object, which you'd have to put on the roof of a regular everyday car, which is manufactured in recent years. And that does lead me on my score out of 10 for this thing, so one of this car out of 10 is going to be receiving a solid 9 out of 10. The reason why it's not a 10 out of 10 is simply because I do think this car would have been better suited for the premium line, where it would get the proper tempo treatment, including the front section and rear section of this car. There is quite a lot of detail missing on this thing, unfortunately, but the casting is a very solid base for this car, and I can't wait to see where it pops up in the future. It's inevitable that it'll probably come to the premium line, and I can't wait for that day. But anyways, that is it for this video. So if you guys did enjoy, make sure to like. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, and you can also press that notification bell so you do not miss any new uploads. Remember, you can also share this video with any friends, family, and any groups who may be interested. But remember, don't feel pressured to if you don't feel like have anybody who may be interested. You watching this video all the way to the end means so much to me, and I really do thank you for making it all the way up until this point. But anyways, that's it for this video. So I hope you guys did enjoy, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye bye everyone.